Welcome back.
Welcome to Decision Space, the only show to take place right here, in the space between the turns in your favorite games. I'm Jake Friedman.
I'm Jared Ingersoll.
And I'm Brendan Hansen.
And this is the podcast about decisions in games.
Jared Ingersoll's here. What?
Woo!
That's so exciting.
Hello.
We're going to talk about games from the 90s. So we knew we needed a Knizia ringer. And there's no better Knizia ringer, maybe in the world, than the one and only Jared Ingersoll. Jared, welcome back to the show.
Thank you. It's great to be here. Thank you for having me back. I will also put forward that just below Knizia is Kramer and Kiesling, who is also well represented in the 90s. So looking forward to talking about them as well.
I cannot wait. Jake, what is our format for the day?
Okay, it's a little bit confusing, but once we get into it, you'll get it and it will all be fine. What we're going to be seeking to do on this episode is create the top 10 list of the best 90s Euro games of all time. And the way we've done this is we've sourced from a list of 20 Euro games that were published in the 90s. We had our Discord members rank those games to give us a top 10. And now we're going to throw out their opinion on those top 10 games and reorder them live into the actual official Decision Space top 10 90s Euro games of all time list.
And we're going to do that with a really cool format that's something like Just One that we'll get into when we actually get into that part of the show. But before we do, I thought it'd be fun to kick this off with a quick reflection of what games we were actually playing in the 90s.
Okay, I'm going to go first because 99% of what I was doing was like whatever lifestyle collectible card game I was into, which progressed from Pokemon cards to Yu-Gi-Oh cards to Magic the Gathering cards. So that was primarily what my gaming mind was focused on. But I'm going to take this opportunity to see if I can uncover a secret from my past. I once, at my cousin's house, when I would go hang out with my cousins, they had all the games. They had like Pokemon Master Trainer. Like I didn't really have games at my house. And they had awesome games. And the game we loved to play the most was this like game that was thematically like Japanese imperial, where you had like these houses and you had guards, and like you could like lose honor by like backstabbing people. I think, and I've tried to look this up on Board Game Geek a dozen times in the past and have never been able to figure out exactly what it was. I think it was called like Shogun or something like that, but that's obviously not enough to be able to identify this game. So if you, listener, played any Shogun related game.
Jake, was it just Shogun, the really famous area control game?
No, it wasn't an area control game. It was like a card game. Like you'd play like a tableau of cards in front of you and you'd be like assassinating other people's characters.
I had to ask that question. So that, 75% of the audience screaming, "It's Shogun!" had an answer that on air.
It might be called Shogun, but it's not an area control game.
Okay.
It's not that one. Anyway, that was my 90s games.
It didn't have a cube tower.
No.
How about you, Jared?
So I was born in the 90s, 1990.
Yeah.
So I spent the 90s being a child and not really playing much in the way of board games other than with my family, some of the mass market stuff. My house, my mother was big into one called Sequence, which uses the deck of 52 cards and then you're playing with cards to try and connect rows on a shared board. So I remember playing that a great deal. And then things like Mancala and Chinese checkers and chess and checkers and all those type of things. So I had no idea what would have been out there. And I don't know if I would have been able to engage with it when I was actually in the 90s, but happy to be enjoying them now.
Can I ask you a question about Sequence? Is there any merit to playing this game now? Because I have a copy on my shelf that my parents picked up at a garage sale, as they often do. They're like, it's brand new in shrink. So I have it. I read the rules. It seems kind of fun. I'm not asking you, Brendan. I'm asking Jared.
Yeah, for the listener, Brendan was emphatically shaking his head. I have not played it probably since the 90s, so I'm not in a position to
if you
comment.
started a game in 99, you would have just finished. So you could. It's really long. It's really long, Jake.
I'm bringing it out at one of the Laughing Table Friend nights, and we'll report back.
Ooh, okay. To keep this part quick, I I had a few games. My family played lots of sort of mass market games. We played Monopoly, right? I was playing Scrabble with my grandparents a lot. Played a lot of cards, poker, spades, that sort of thing. But I also had Pokemon Master Trainer, the game that Jake, you alluded to, which the components were incredible. There were components, they were just punches, like punch, 1-inch circles for every single Pokemon. And I didn't really know the rules. Vaguely, I did. But I think the most fun thing about playing Master Trainer was my friends and I would just make up whatever rules we thought felt the most thematic for playing through a quest of Pokemon. So that was a fun sort of early, let's think about our experience. I also played a lot of Pass the Pigs. Have you all heard of this game?
Oh
Sort of
yeah.
a pig rolling game. You have pigs, so there's little pig sculpts, Jared, that you roll, and you care about how if they land on their feet, if they land on their side with their feet up. There's scoring for if they stack on top of each other somehow miraculously. So I had a blast with that. And then I had friends who had just a ton of games, but they were popular kids games of the day in a way. So things like Payday, or their family would have all of the sort of toyish games like Don't Break the Ice, where you'd put
Oh
all the ice
yeah.
into a cube and had little hammers you had to hit out. So that's sort of a dexterity hobby game. They also
You
had
just
the
unlocked
elephant.
like a core memory of like Ants in the Pants game
Oh,
or
yes.
something.
Ants in the Pants.
I
Yes.
forget.
I don't even know the rules of that one, but that, yeah, 100%. There was also the elephant that would blow the
Yes.
butterflies into the air and you would catch them with a net. Yeah.
Hell yeah.
So that's mostly what I was doing, was stuff like that. And then at the same time as we were doing all this, there was a really interesting thing happening in board games in the 90s. So I think there's really these sort of three major trends happening. And y'all tell me if I'm wrong, but we have someone named Dr. Reiner Knizia really doing amazing things with board games and sort of exploring the ways in which tabletop games can exist, sort of the ways in which you might interact, and then riffing on ideas and iterating really fast, whether it's with auctions or with his tiling games. These two innovative things that were happening in the 90s for him. Also some cool card games. Then you also had hobby games. Magic the Gathering happens in 1992, almost creates modern board game stores in the United States through just the sheer revenue stream that comic book shops saw out of sort of tabletop and card games. And then you have the Eurogame movement with stuff like Catan. Alan R. Moon was designing a lot of games that would kind of build up to Ticket to Ride for him. And a lot of sort of globalization of trends that were happening in the 80s with games in Germany, like Demacher, all of a sudden having this broader audience and people outside of Germany and Europe sort of saying, there's a really interesting thing happening. We want a part of it. And then there's just an explosion in 2000, but we don't care about 2000 today.
No, we're not
It's
talking
all
about
90s,
2000.
baby.
It is a incredibly exciting time for games, and we're looking at this retroactively now, but we're about to get into the top 10 list. And one thing that fascinated me in doing the research to pull that list of 20 games together was how tight the consensus is around these 20-ish. And I could have pulled in one or left one off. That there's really right around 20 games from the 90s that are still talked about widely in the modern board game space today. So I thought that was interesting. And I'm not sure if I'm sure it's a little bit of both. I don't know if that's just because there were so many fewer games being published, and also that now 35 years past, we've kind of had time to edit down the games that really stood the test of time.
There's certainly an element of survivor bias, right? The ones that people talk about rose to the top because there were plenty of not great games still coming out, but the ones that did remain have become foundational to what we understand about the hobby. And yeah, building on the shoulder of giants. Board games are it's an iterative process in a lot of ways. Like people have these breakthroughs that then other designers run with and put their own spin on, and it just keeps growing and growing. So a lot of the impact from the '90s is being felt all the time.
Dang. I just learned that Sid Sackson's I'm the Boss came out in the 90s, and that we're probably not still feeling the impact of that, but that's interesting. We're not going to talk about that game beyond this because it is not on our top 10 list. I can spoil it for everyone. But I think the 90s are this interesting amalgamation, right? Jared, there's all these games that we're still sort of feeling the impact of them today. A lot of those that are going to be on our top 10. Then you have one-offs from designers like Sid Sackson with I'm the Boss. Then there's interesting stuff happening in war games, which we won't talk about at all today. Games that I've sort of I don't have any expertise in this area, but there's things like For the People, I think is a big one of this era. And then there's other sort of adjacent stuff.
Miniature games too. Blood Bowl and Warhammer are big 90s games that also didn't make this list, just for more of a specific focus on Euro games.
I have a game that I'm curious if either of you have played that kind of fits between the Eurogames / war games that we're just talking about. Have either of you played History of the World?
No.
I have
Okay,
not.
so History of the World is this sort of classic game that came out in 1991 that was sort of trying to take risk and make it faster, I think, but it's a global game where you're introducing these different civilizations as time goes on. You take those civilizations, lay them out on the board, and sort of simulate their movement. So maybe in some version plays of History of the World, Egypt has this amazing, run, and kind of the civilization of Egypt goes all the way into Europe, but it plays out over 4 hours. That's a game that I've heard from a lot of players who were really active in the 90s talking about the History of the World and the sort of the impact that that game has had as a thematic gaming experience on sort of their memory of the 90s and sort of experience of games in general. So that's a cool one. Also not going to be on our list, but I wanted to call that out.
Yeah, if this is the time that we're just talking about games that did not make the list of 20 games we'll be ranking today, we should also mention we ultimately chose not to include Magic the Gathering on this as well. Brendan, you've already mentioned that as being an incredibly important gaming development in the 90s. Arguably the most important. Perhaps a lot of people who listen to this podcast might think Reiner Knizia's contributions are
Or
the most,
Catan.
or Catan. But when you think about just sort of like the mass market demand for card games, we also didn't include games that fit more into slightly outside of Euro games, more into like mass market stuff. So Time's Up is a really popular game that also didn't make this list. And then I think there are like some real cult classic stuff, but maybe just like don't have the same type of following today. So Hoity Toity, I know, is a favorite by Charlie in the Laughing Table Friends. That didn't make the list, but it is a Spiel winner from I think 1990. And there's some other games that like you see mentioned here that I just didn't have any familiarity with. So one of them is Daytona 500. I saw that mentioned a few places as being like a really good game, an important game from this era. So there's some stuff like that that's just outside of my scope of knowledge. So those games unfortunately didn't make the list as well.
And I think a lot of the 90s is somewhat laying the groundwork for what would come. It's sort of this interstitial space. Even with something, Jake, you mentioned Magic the Gathering. It's hard to imagine walking into a board game store in maybe 2011 with Magic never existing. Do you never get Dominion and sort of all of these games that follow it that I think owe this debt of gratitude to something like Magic, or even things like Clank following off of Dominion and Magic the Gathering. There's just lots of sort of games that I think the tale of Magic is long and broad and hard to sort of trace.
We could probably talk about this a lot, and a lot of it would be speculating for us, but it does feel like only more recently did sort of the hobby board game space coalesce into a single space with like the friendly local game shop, because they would sell Magic at my comic book store growing up, but Catan or Carcassonne would be at the toy store.
Mm-hmm.
That's just my experience, and I'm sure it wasn't the same story everywhere in the world. But should we get to our top 10 list portion of this episode?
Yeah. Hit me, baby, one more time.
What we're going to do is first share number 20 through 11 of our list that we've created.
And these are ranked by an audience of listeners from our Discord community.
So in 20th place, Torres. In 19th, Chinatown. 18th, Condottiere. 17th, Catan. 16th, Robo Rally. 15th, Tichu. 14th, Bus. 13th, Samurai. 12th place, Tikal. And 11th, just missing the top 10 list, For Sale. Your thoughts, folks?
It's interesting seeing, so we've talked about sort of doing Eurogames ranking. Robo Rally is a game here that I think stands aside in some ways. That's a game designed by Richard Garfield before Magic the Gathering. In the sort of famous story, he goes to Wizards of the Coast to pitch a game, is pitching Robo Rally, and the owner of the company says, "Oh, I can't make that. It has way too many pieces." It's sort of evoking the sort of it's a very different time in sort of board game hobby space that a publisher, they're a role-playing game publisher, but sort of saying, no, we can't make a board game, but we could make a card game. So then Richard Garfield goes back, adapts one of his other games, makes it into a trading card game, and it becomes Magic. So I think it's cool sort of seeing Robo Rally there as well, knowing that there's sort of this thread of ideas. I'll call out Splotter too, Bus and Roads and Boats. I think two very fondly remembered games from the 90s that are still held up as eminently playable Splotter games, and maybe pretty big part of the affection that people have for Splotter is because of those two games.
Yeah, for sure. It's interesting to see the few different ethos that were at play in the 90s, and they kind of formed the start of their own branches that you can see trace the lineage from Bus, from Robo Rally, things along those lines. And of course, Catan, it's the elephant in the room, the start of these German style games coming over to America, and I think it is widely respected, but I do think it's one that not many hobbyists are still playing regularly, and so it's suffered somewhat in these rankings.
Catan was definitely my first sort of Euro strategy game. And I think that it's one of those games where the impact of it is so hard to sort of imagine outside of the context, because it just feels so much of what would come after it is so directly inspired by it in some ways, or paved by it. It's sort of like when you watch a classic movie and you're like, seems kind of whatever, but you're missing sort of how miraculous it. Of course, it feels like that because everything that came after it was kind of saying, "Oh, we got to do it like that thing. We have to emulate this." So it makes the originator not feel as special. Yeah, was Catan both of your first sort of Euro-ish strategy game too?
Definitely for me.
Yeah,
No,
Jared's
not for me.
emphatically shaking no.
Yeah, I have played Catan a few times, but it was after I had played some of its descendants, so it suffered in comparison for me. I also had a bad teacher, and so it somewhat soured the experience.
I loved Catan, and I think it was the first time that I was able to apply some of the skills I had learned from playing Magic the Gathering to a board game. You know, really the first time really realizing, oh wow, these are strategy games too, beyond just kind of the mass market ants in the pants style games that I had been playing before.
Sure.
The other thing I would say too, I just have to add this because of the point on Catan maybe feeling like it's a little bit diminished by what's come after it. Because by and large, when I look at this list, I think you can't, like, you honestly can't go wrong playing any of these games today. I think
Yeah.
every game on this top 20 list is absolutely worth your time today. And not, if maybe you haven't played a lot of these games, not familiar with them, don't cast them off just because they're 30 years old or older. T-Call, for one, is on my top 10 games of all time today. And I have a blast playing that. I think playing right now a game online with Jared and having a great time doing it. T-Call Legends is coming out soon. So these are, even though these ideas are in some ways being built upon and changed and redefined, some of these games, like the core being so pure, it's just that these games got there first, you know, and if somebody released the game today, they would be amazing.
Okay, should we do it? Should we do the ranking? So how this is going to work is, if any of our listeners have played Just One, we all have our Just One boxes right here. We got our little slates and our pens. We're going to take turns writing down. Two of us will write down a game that we think should go in the slot that we're at. So if we're going to start with 10, and two of us are going to write down the game we think should be there. If they match, that's the number 10 ranked game. If they don't, the other person, after the two players who wrote down the games make a brief case for the game, will pick the game that's ranked whatever slot we're ranking. So I guess let's get into it. Who wants to be the first decider? Jared, as our guest, would you like to be the first decider or the first giver of a presenter?
I will be the receiver.
Okay,
The
you'll be the
decider.
receiver, or the decider.
The decider.
Okay. Ooh, so this
Okay.
is interesting.
So I'm absolutely metagaming this, knowing what I know of Jared and Brendan's taste.
Oh no.
What? Well, it's
Okay.
my only chance in getting any say. Okay.
Number
So
10.
and don't forget, we're eliminating Magic, so don't write that down.
Don't write Magic. Yeah. And to be clear, what we're doing is we're making the top 10 Euro strategy game list of the 90s from the perspective today. Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, I'm erasing what I had. Now that I
All right,
Mm.
and
Okay, I've got mine.
I have played all of these but one in the top 10, so I will have opinions.
Okay, I'm ready to, Jake. Should we do it on 3?
Wait, I changed mine last second.
Just
Okay,
one more second. Okay.
I'm ready.
3, 2, 1.
Bonanza.
Schotten Totten.
All right, so Jake managed to pick the one that I have not played, Bonanza.
Nice.
Well, let me make my case, and then Brendan, you make yours.
Okay.
My case on Bonanza is going to be really simple, which is that it is I have not played it. It's a negotiation game, and I do not like negotiation games, so I can only assume that it's not very fun to play.
I think you'd love yelling about Uwe Rosenberg's beans. It's a fun little game, I will say. Bonanza packs a punch. It's not, the negotiation is not as browbeating as you might feel
I
it could
I
be.
might like to try it, but
Yeah, try it.
I did kind of defer just based on a game I haven't played, and that's why I went with Bonanza.
I think that's a good one. Okay, I have Schotten Totten ranked.
Just as an aside on Bonanza, I own a copy of Bonanza that I have not played, and I have owned it for 12 years. And at this point, it's just kind of a sick game that I'm playing with myself to see how long I can avoid. Well, I have had this copy of Bonanza, and I've brought it with me all over the world in many different states and all these different places that I've lived, and have yet to actually pull it off the shelf. So that's my own sick mind at work, and not necessarily the fault of Bonanza that I haven't played it.
That's awesome. So I have Schotten Totten for 10th. I don't know if two-player dueling games started in the 90s, but it's clear that they picked up a lot of steam in the 90s with games like Schotten Totten and Lost Cities, and also the Kahuna, which was the first game in the series of two-player games from, oh my gosh, the publisher is escaping me right now. Why are they escaping me? Give me one moment to get this right. From Cosmos, the two-player games from Cosmos, where you would get things in that line like Lost Cities and Targi, a huge sort of, all these sort of touchstone two-player games. And I think Schotten Totten is just delightfully simple, but it also plays in that sort of classic card game-ish space. It uses poker hands to determine the suits. I think it's just a brilliant game that is going to be played for decades and decades. So that's why I have Schotten Totten. I'm just going to start it at 10 because I'll keep throwing it up.
Wait, you want it to be 10th?
10.
Like you think it's the worst of the games remaining?
How many games were published in the 90s? Like 1,000.
Yeah, okay. I'm just saying,
Yeah,
I just want to make sure you understand because you said only good things about it.
Yeah, it's a great game. It's
But-
top 10. There should be no.
But the worst on the list, in your opinion.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, thank you. All right, I just want to make sure. Okay, Decider, it's up to you.
All right, well,
Easy.
I have played Schotten Totten in its battle line incarnation, and I love it. And so will vote for Bonanza
All
as number
right.
10.
Bonanza
Oh
number
my
10.
gosh.
Okay,
That was
and
really metagamed.
And what we're gonna do is to prevent the inevitability of whoever didn't have theirs picked just putting it again. Brendan, you're the next decider,
Okay, great.
and Jared and I are gonna write games.
Okay, while y'all are writing games down
I've got
on your
mine.
card. Wow, speed racer over here. I guess we should be, while we are giving witty banter in the middle, writing down our next games, just in case. I think that, Jared, are you ready? You look like
I'm
you're ready
ready.
too. Okay, let's do it. Let's not
All
waste
right.
time. Number 9. In
3, 2,
1.
1.
Lost Cities.
Oh.
Schotten Totten.
Okay, Jared, why Lost Cities for 9?
I think Lost Cities is a solid game, but when we're talking about head-to-head, two-player only card games, it is not my preferred way to go. So I would always choose Battle Line / Schotten Totten over Lost Cities.
Ooh.
I picked Schotten Totten because I actually had written down on the first one, and then I was like, Brendan will never pick a Knizia game. So then I was like kicking myself. We could have had Schotten Totten number 10. We got to get it in now, number 9.
I think we do.
There are games below it that definitely deserve to be higher.
Okay, here's the conundrum.
Like it's a crime.
I just have to talk you through this. If I pick Schotten Totten and Lost Cities doesn't end up on this list, devastation.
No, what do you mean doesn't end up? They're all going to end up on the list.
No, because what if something from below ends up there?
No, you
What if
can't
I-
pick the below.
What if I pick Samurai?
We're
What
only
if I pick
picking.
Tikal?
We're only picking from the top 10. That's the whole thing. We're rearranging just the top 10. That's why I read the 20 to 19 or 20 to 11.
Oh, great. Okay, that makes it easy. Are you sure?
Yeah, yes.
So I can't write down something not on the list?
Correct.
Okay.
That's
Okay.
what you were thinking originally, right, Jared?
Yes, I was on
Okay,
the same
fine.
page.
Okay.
Schotten Totten number 9, final answer.
Boom.
Yeah.
Okay. Perfect.
All right. Now Jared's the next
We
decider.
we could just edit that part out. Make sure for Brendan. He knew what we were doing the whole time.
I knew something like the way you were talking about shot and Totten the first time. I was like, Brendan's not understanding something here.
You're lucky I didn't write Balderdash. That's also from 1984. Oh, we're supposed to be writing games. Okay.
I've got mine. I'm ready.
Well, this is
Brendan, do the right thing here.
Yeah, well, the right thing is the wrong thing. So make sure you're doing the wrong thing. Okay, ready? 3, 2, 1.
Through the desert.
High society.
No!
High society. All right, so we have our first Knizia versus Knizia matchup. It's gonna be first of many. So high society.
How about this? Can I make the case for why high society is good, and Brendan, you can make the case for why Through the Desert is good instead of being negative,
Sure.
Yeah, I
right?
like that.
That makes
Yeah,
sense.
yeah.
Okay, High Society, an incredible auction game. It is one of the few games I think in my collection that plays just as well with my colleagues at work as it does
Mm.
with my like hardcore gaming enthusiasts. So it just has incredible range to be fun in a wide variety of circumstances. It's got the classic Knizia twist. Jared, you would know better than I if this is the first instance of Knizia saying you win the game unless you've done X. That's something we've seen in other subsequent games. But in High Society has the absolute classic twist of you win as long as you get the most points unless you have the least amount of money at the end of the game, which does so much from both the mechanical and excitement perspective during the game, but also is actually incredibly thematic as you play it as well too, as the game almost encourages you to role play as rich members of high society, but you don't want to be caught with your pants down at the end of the game. So it's awesome. Such a fun little auction game.
Through the Desert is a incredible tiling game from Knizia. And I think for me, the thing about Through the Desert that sets it apart is there's this really incredible arc in Through the Desert. And you see that in a lot of the tiling games from Knizia. But it plays a variety of player counts really well. And you're sort of paralyzed by the potential of the shape of the board in a really beautiful way. But it doesn't overstay its welcome. It also, in a delightful way for Knizia, that I think a lot of his games in the 90s were doing and still do, asks you to focus on multiple priorities all at the same time. And it doesn't say choose this or that. It just says you have to do all these things and you have to do them better than everyone else. And that's how you're going to win. And I think juggling all those little mini puzzles within this broader decision space is really delightful and fun. It is also just charming and cute in a whimsical way that I think it clearly is standing the test of time. There's a brand new Through the Desert coming out now. It's okay. We have to be positive. So I'm going to stop.
Wait, Brendan.
Yeah.
What is like the general gist of how you play Through the Desert?
Sure.
I realize I didn't do a good job of that, so let's try and give a little bit of sense of how the game actually plays too for people who maybe aren't as familiar.
Yeah, Through the Desert has a hex board that's a shared play space in which everyone is going to be adding these camels of different colors that represent their camels' caravans to the board. You have to always connect your camels to your caravan of the same color, but each of you have these different colors that you can play. You're simultaneously trying to connect oases. You're trying to sort of cordon off space. If you can block off a whole space on the board, you'll score points for all of those spaces. So you're trying to control large areas, usually while blocking each other off. You can never connect with your own camel caravan or directly with another player. So there's lots of the same color. So there's lots of sort of posturing and moving into spaces to block other players, just sort of trying to preempt where you think they're going to go. And then you're also trying to have the longest caravan overall. You're juggling all these little pieces. And that's more or less the game. It plays in under 40 minutes typically.
Awesome. And in High Society, it's just an auction game where you'll flip up a card that's worth points, and then you'll do around the table increasing auctions where you'll play money cards from your hand until everybody else has backed off, essentially. All right, Jared, ready for your decision.
These are both great games, and the one that I'm going to put in number 8 is Through the Desert. It's more just my enthusiasm for high society, and Through the Desert is one that I enjoy, but I have not had as much experience with to plumb the depths.
Excellent. All right, Brendan, kicking you back into the deciding role once again. Wow,
Okay.
this is going really great for me. um, okay, let me think. My next game. Okay, this is gonna be. Oh man, it's really getting hard at this point, isn't it?
Yeah, these are all good games. It's
Okay, I've got mine. Three,
Okay.
2, 1.
6 nipped.
Tigris and Euphrates and 6 nymphs? Jake, what are you doing? Okay, let's do it. Let's do the overviews, if we must.
Jared, do you want to swap again, or how do you want to do this?
Yeah, so Tigers and Euphrates is my favorite game, and so there is a lot of bias involved. It is it is a masterpiece, and I think it deserves much higher on this list. Spoiler alert.
That's fine. Yeah, you're allowed to be biased. That's the whole point of this. So what do you do in Tigers and Euphrates? What makes it so
So
exciting and fun?
Tigers and Euphrates is modeling the rise and falls of ancient Babylonian kingdoms around the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. So you are playing tiles on the board in order to score points, and you can do that in a variety of ways, both by placing the tiles, by building monuments that will generate points, and by defeating other players in wars or revolts. So it is a very tactical game where you have to make a lot of choices, and there is wild points on the board that force players to come together and encourages that conflict. And the other classic hook on there is your final score is whichever of the 4 colors you have the fewest points in. So you are, even if you're doing really well in blue, it doesn't matter unless you also have enough points in the other colors. So it is the best game of all time. No further questions.
Wow. That's a high praise. Six Nymphs is a lot like Tigris and Euphrates. It's just a lot more fun. Um, in my opinion. It's so Nymph is a very simple card game by Wolfgang Kramer, and the way this game works is you have 4 cards that create rows, and everybody will simultaneously play one numbered card from their hand. I think the cards go from 1 to 102 or something kind of wacky like that. And once everybody has revealed their cards, you'll play them in lowest to highest. So the lowest numbered card played goes first, and it will be played into a row wherever it has the least difference from the subsequent number. If your card ends up in a row where it's the 5th card, you have to claim the whole row. You essentially like bust, get those for positive points, and you're trying to be the person who has the least positive points at the end of the game once somebody's reached a certain number of points. It sounds simple, and it is, but it is just chaotic, fun, hilarious. Every time I do a Pub Meeple ranking, I'm kind of surprised by something, and this time I was surprised by how much I love Six Nymph. It kept wanting battles for me. I think it ended up as like number 2 on my list at the end of my own ranking. So a game I really really enjoy. And Jared, I know you couldn't ever put it above T&E, but you will admit even that we had an incredibly fun play of this at a recent Laughing Table Friends night. Uh-oh.
Yes, I love Six Nimped. It is pound for pound one of the best card games out there. It's wonderful.
And that is why it is the 7th best game of the
Oh,
90s.
son of a... All right, that's fine. That's fine. I am now in the deciding position, and I'm
Okay.
out for blood, and I'm ready to break some hearts.
Okay. Let's do it. 3,
Ready to go?
2, 1.
Lost Cities.
Yes. Okay, so Jared and I have both double crossed. So it's Lost Cities. We both written Lost Cities. So that makes
So
Lost
Jake
Cities.
continues to have no decisions to make.
Yeah.
Brutal. That all right. So, Lost Cities is an incredibly fun 2-player dueling game from Cosmos, designed by Reiner Knizia. In Lost Cities, you are competing over a series of 6 expeditions that are taking place in the middle of the board. On your turn, you'll simply draw a card and play a card. And whenever you play a card down, you can either put it face up in front of you, meaning you're committing to going on that expedition, or you can put it in the middle central discard pile above each of the 6 different colored expeditions, presenting your opponent with the opportunity to draw from that card. It creates a really wonderful sense of tension with such simple mechanisms where the main feeling you have playing this game is like, I wish I could do nothing, right? I don't want to play the card from my hand, but I also can't bear to like give this to my opponent. Such a tricky game, such high skill ceiling. I absolutely love it. I have a friend at work, Chase, and we play this all the time, just over lunch breaks. It's become one of my favorite games.
The contracts just take a great game and make it amazing. Contracts raising the stakes for potential of losing or gaining huge points in a specific
The wagers.
expedition. The wagers. Yep. Thank you.
Yes.
Okay.
And speaking, we were talking about the 90s and how like the descendants, so Lost Cities in particular, has spawned so many spin-offs. So Lost Cities, and then he also turned that into Celtis, which was his only Spiel des Jahres win thus far. And yeah,
That
so
is
when you look
crazy.
at
That is crazy board game trivia right there.
yes, so and then they made that
How is
into
that possible?
yep. So Celtis was then redone kind of as Lost Cities, the board game. So this same core system of having to build up your numbers in sequence and they're able to pass. He's gone back to that many times. And for me, I do like Lost Cities, but I prefer some of the other ways that he has done it.
Cool. Nice. And I just haven't played those except for Lost Cities Roll and Write, which uh, Jared, you neglected to mention. Okay, how do we want to do this?
We'll just keep you in the hot seat.
Okay, but if you guys go the same again, we have to rotate.
Okay.
I know what Brennan's gonna do.
Ooh. Okay, so we modern art for Jared against high society for me. Again, for number 5, the 5th best game of the 90s. Jared, why is it modern art?
I thought we were doing the positive side. So
We have to do
say
reverse. Oh my god.
yeah.
Modern art
Yeah.
is just
Keep
a
up, Brendan.
brilliant, just incredible auction game that places players within the position of being auctioneers, buying and selling art for these 5 different artists. Your agent within the game doesn't really make a ton of sense. You're both auctioneer, you're both art buyer, you're both museum according to the little player screen in front of you. But the whole point is that this game evokes the feeling of what it's like to chase modern art and to sort of speculate on modern art and to maybe gas up the market of a particular artist who you have a ton of art of theirs in the reserve and you want them to be valuable in the future. So how can you influence the market to make them worth more so that you can really cash out when it counts? Modern art is a brilliant game that makes a lot out of a little in terms of its decision space, in terms of its rules load, but leads to this really nuanced decision space. It also has an amazing reveal because the money that everyone has, which is whoever has the most money at the end will win. You get paid out for art that you sell in a given round and art that you have at the end of a round based on how popular more or less that artist is. It's just a brilliant game. And the end reveal when everyone pulls it up, says how much money they have, I think means that the game always ends on a high note, which is sort of, in my mind, one of maybe the foundational magic tricks of modern art. It takes a game that is great and elevates it even further by ensuring that its players on the whole typically have at least an exciting moment that they remember for their last experience of the game. And that's why I think modern art is way better than the 5th best game of the 90s. But if we need to be 5th, I'm here to sell for it.
So board games, right? They're abstract simulations, right? Distill down, and modern art, I think, is one of the few that can also function as a satire, right? It has a point of view and about modern art and the way that it's trying to be sold and the values are inflated based on current popularity in season. So modern art is a brilliant game. And then just to continue, high society. So Jake spoke about it earlier, and one of the other core components is some of the things you're going to be bidding on will be bad. There are faux pas, or you could be passe, and so then it flips the script to where the first person to pass takes the card, the negative card, and then everyone else has to pay their money. So it creates real tension there because those special cards are also the end game trigger. So high society, it's always dramatic because you do not know when it is going to end, because it's when the fourth card is revealed that it goes out. So a lot of people, they're trying to be prudent with their money and conserve it, but you don't know when it's going to end. So you can't just sit back and let people get the points, because a winning score might be 4 or 5 points, and you are holding out for the big values that never appeared. So high society is wonderful.
Man, two incredible games by Reiner Knizia, two incredible auction games. Modern Art is, I think, of all the games on this list, perhaps the one that can be the most hit or miss with groups. So I think that's why I'm going to ultimately put it at number 5. I love Modern Art. I've had genuinely great experiences playing it, but I've also had just kind of like weird experience playing where if not everybody at the table has like maybe the same amount of familiarity with it. I think the mechanisms are not incredibly well signposted in a way that sees people making bets that just are making bids that
Purchases. Yeah.
don't really make sense for like end game scoring in a way that you more often than you might expect. So it's the type of game where like if you had one game on a desert island, this is a great pick because you could just keep playing it forever, and as people get more experience with it, it would just get better and better. But also it's not one that I would always recommend like pulling out with new players and experienced players together. So for that reason, I think high society for me is like the more flexible game with like a higher hit percent. So I'm gonna pick modern art here as the number 5th best game of the 90s.
Awesome. Okay,
And
so
I knew
Jared
that
is
Jake
now.
had that opinion, and so which is why I picked it.
Wow,
But yes,
amazing.
I agree with him. As much as I love modern art, it is one of the most fragile of auction games, where someone paying the quote unquote incorrect price for a painting can throw things off for the rest of
But
the
when it
players. So
hits, it just hits so
yes,
hard.
agreed.
And Brendan is the decider here.
No, Jared is. Because Jared picked modern art. I picked high society.
Oh, Jared's a decider.
Yeah. Okay, Mr.
And
Gamify. What is this, a podcast about games? Like you got to gamify a podcast? Okay,
yeah, I'm trying
okay.
to. I have to do everything I can to make sure that this is the best top 10 games of the 90s list of all time.
And you'll get, those secret decision space behind the scenes ELO points that we've been
Well, like the
tracking for 3
closer
years.
it is to my subjective opinion, the better I think
Yeah.
the list is. So,
Right, exactly. Okay.
Okay. Okay, wait, hold on. I need to look at what we've picked already. So we've got 4 games left.
I think we are going to agree on the top 3, but
Yeah, there's
yeah,
one
just
clear
the
choice
relative
here.
order.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Jake's about to write Tigris and Euphrates. I know he
3,
is.
2, 1. Tigris and Euphrates. Come on, Jared, do the right thing.
The right thing is, of course, high society and number 4.
Jake had no idea when he picked this format he was going to be abused.
Honestly, like if it was just me coming up with this list,
You would have banned Tigris?
Tigris and Euphrates would have been like 10th for me.
Okay.
Because it's just a game that I've really tried hard and for whatever reason bounced off of more than I would have liked. So, but I knew as soon as we invited Jared, that wasn't going to happen. And I'm okay with that because obviously I'm in the minority opinion there. So that's why, I actually think this format's working as intended. All right.
Have you
So
ever
now
really
we have top
lived
3. Huh?
until you've played Tigris and Euphrates and during a war revealed 6 red tiles in a red war? Have you ever really lived?
No, but I feel like I've had that happen to me.
Yeah.
That made me feel things.
And not alive? Okay, let's do it.
Okay. All right. So now we're down to the top 3, and I'm the decider. Let's see it.
Oh!
No.
Yes! The third best game of the 90s
Oh, this
is
is
Raw.
devastating.
Jake, you get to
Wait,
tell
this is a
everyone.
coup. This is actually. I see what's happening.
You get to tell
Good
everyone why
job.
Raw is amazing. The third best
Yeah.
game of the
Okay. Well,
90s.
that is a good consolation prize. So Raw is, in my opinion, the best auction game by Reiner Knizia. In Raw, you are doing a series of auctions. You'll be creating the, I guess, pool of tiles that you'll be auctioning off by drawing randomly from a bag of tiles. And once any player, so you'll keep drawing tiles, I'll draw a tile, Brendan will draw a tile, Jared will draw a tile. At any point, any player can declare raw. And that means we will immediately hold an auction where each person will be able to bid only one number, and the numbers that they're able to bid are limited to just 3 or 4 sun discs, depending on player count. And so it's like an auction that is, and it just goes around once. Whoever bid the most wins, and then we do that over and over again. There's of course wrinkles with scoring. Some of the tiles that you'll draw out of the bag are bad. Some of the tiles will create an auction immediately. And I think what is so amazing about this game is how the constraints on what players are able to do in the game are so strong, right? You're only able, you've such blunt tools. You can only declare an auction or draw, and when it comes time for auction, you have a very limited set of resources to use to bid. And yet within that, you have incredible, exciting push your luck moments, of strategy and tactics and how to use those scarce resources. And it also creates an experience that's like almost always fun and engaging and relatively close. Like it feels like the game stays on the tracks more often than most auction games do, which tend to be games of really high agency. So it's sort of like a low agency auction game that works and is incredibly exciting and fun. And that's how I would describe Raw. What do you guys think of Raw?
I agree that it is his best auction game. It is also my favorite of his. I think the Sun Disk mechanism is genius. Like it, when I think about it, it's yeah, I think it is so clean. I think it is so well implemented, and I don't know if you touched on this during, but they also contribute towards end game scoring because that's a subset of you want to have the most highest value of subset. So the fact that you can trigger an auction not caring at all about what the lot of tiles is up for, but just to get the previously used sun disk into your hand and just the tempo of your turn. It, I think it is a staggering work of brilliance. I love Raw so much, and it's just a testament to the other remaining games that it's not higher, because I do think it's 10 out of 10, a masterpiece of a game.
I'll jump in and just follow up on the Sundusk gushing and say that yes, and I think that Raw's scoring and the ways in which it presents these different tile sets that are juxtaposed against one another that you're trying to collect all while sort of collecting them all at the same time lays the groundwork for a lot of games that would come in the subsequent 25 years. A lot of Phil Walker Harding games, things like Sushi Go, those scoring incentives are shockingly similar in a lot of ways to Raw. Just much simplified, but doing something really similar with a totally different genre, different weight. And I think it owes a debt in a lot of ways to the really incredible incentive design of Raw. So Raw is just, a bang up game. Definitely one of the best games of the 90s. A game I'd always be happy to play. I can absolutely see why it's clearly, according to Jake, the third best game of the 90s.
It also is like a game that is clearly still kicking today, right? There's like a great new edition in print by 25th Century Games where you can get like ridiculously deluxe components if you want. But I have to be honest with you guys, I almost want to like trade my deluxe version for
too
like
deluxe.
it's too big.
Yeah.
Like it just there's like a little bit of a mismatch between box size and gameplay that I feel like I would get it off myself more if I had the smaller version box size.
And you still have the sun disc in that version. That's the version I have. It feels delightful. It's still really nice.
Yeah, what you want the wooden sun discs for sure.
Yeah, you have
but I
to.
don't
It's
know that
very
I need wooden tiles. Anyway,
tiles.
that's a tangent.
Okay, so now
guys,
I'm the decider, right?
I think we have two
games
games
left.
I think we should all write them down, and
we
we'll
vote.
be guaranteed to create.
Yeah, we just get to vote.
We'll either have a consensus or we'll still have a winner.
Yeah. So this is for the second best game. No, let's write down the first.
Let's write down the best game.
Yeah, we write down the best game.
Of the 90s.
Of the 90s.
Are we ready?
Yeah.
Do the right thing here, guys. 3, 2, 1. El Grande takes it!
Oh,
I was so
betrayal.
nervous. So Brendan and I wrote El Grande. Jared wrote Tigris and Euphrates, which I think we've already heard quite a bit about, but so that's number 2. Brendan, why don't you talk a little bit about El Grande and why that is in our consensus opinion, being Jared, you, and myself, the best game of the 90s.
Okay, perfect. So El Grande, the reason why I picked El Grande over Tigris and Euphrates, and I love Tigris and Euphrates. I think it's an
You think
incredible game
deserving is number 2,
that just
clearly.
has such a unique. Yeah, no, it's a really unique decision space. But in looking at this list of games, I think it's really difficult to understate the impact that El Grande has on games that come after it. And I'm not sure Tigris and Euphrates, despite how incredible of a game it is, has quite the same impact. So for me, El Grande gets the nod as a game that is representative of an incredible game from the 90s that would have a lasting impact for just decades to come. In some ways, I think if there's sort of a board game that people think of, if they're not thinking of efficiency Euros, they might be thinking of El Grande, at least among hobbyists. And by El Grande, I mean an area majority type game in which you're vying control using these sort of multiple modes of play, right? You're thinking about the board, you're thinking about the cards you have in play as you're trying to get your cubes onto the board in these different regions and scoring points multiple times throughout the round. El Grande, in my mind, has this perfect blend of different qualities that appeal to a broad range of players. So it has the efficiency puzzle of managing that hand of cards. It also has this sort of shared tactical board play of choosing a card in a given round. It has the ability to directly interact in a way that feels fair with the king, where you need to use that to control the leader. And then it also has these really interesting simultaneous choices with the Castillo that are fun and thinky and reward players who want to get inside the minds of other players and not just focus on an efficiency puzzle. And I think it's this beautiful meeting of all of these different types of games, many of which this sort of decision spaces of games on this list sort of explore niches of that, right? Maybe we explore the sort of the hand management of with Schotten Totten, or maybe we explore the interesting simultaneous choices with Six Nimmt, or maybe we're thinking about efficiency puzzles and we're trying to figure out how to play efficiently in Raw or Tigris and Euphrates. And El Grande almost kind of marries all of these different ways of play into this one trim package that plays 2 to 5 players in 90 minutes. It's an incredible game. That's why I think El Grande is the best game
I
of the
agree.
90s.
Well said. One thing that's cool about El Grande, and I think a lot of these games, right? And I guess this is transitioning our conversation a little bit to our wrap up here, where we talk about the list as a whole, which is that as I play this game more, I'm continuing to learn more, experience different aspects of it. I'm playing in a 3-player El Grande tournament on Board Game Arena right now. Hadn't really played the game at 3 players that much, and absolutely loving that experience too. And it's really interesting how it completely changes the value of the cards in your hand, because you're going to be getting your people, your workers onto the board, or what are they called? The caballeros.
Caballero.
You'll be able to get the
Caballeros.
caballeros into your court and onto the board much easier, making kind of the weight and impact of different actions totally different. And I think that's probably a good sign for a game that's going to last and stand the test of time. And I think that's probably a characteristic that you see in a lot of, if not all of these games that made the top 10 and 20 list.
Yes, I have no problem with El Grande being on top of a consensus list. So, while Tigers and Euphrates is my number 1 game, El Grande is my number 5. Right? I also think it's a masterpiece. It is so well done. It's and the amount of depth that it provides. The pseudo auction with the power cards and having to balance that, the way the timing of scoring works and trying to position yourself, and how interactive it is. You care about everybody's turn every single time. Like you're always fully engaged, and it's a wonderful experience. And it is. I don't personally enjoy it at 3, but I can see the premise. But 4 or 5, it doesn't get much better
Yeah, that would
than
still be my preference, 4 or
Grande.
5. Yeah.
Yeah, I still have not played any of the expansion content. Right, I have the big box edition with all the, what's it called, the intrigue version of the decks, and I'd be interested to try that sometime. But just from was it 1997, and basically invented the area influence genre, and yet remains best in class is such an incredible achievement.
Totally.
And just so 95. Crazy. 95. Before Catan, there was El Grande.
So, really quickly, here's the top 10 list, just for those who maybe weren't writing this down at home. In number 10, Bohnanza. Number 9, Schotten Totten. 8, Through the Desert. 7, 6, Nimmt. 6, Lost Cities. 5, Modern Art. 4, High Society. 3, Raw. 2, Tigris and Euphrates. And number 1, El Grande.
I think that's a good list.
Of those 10 games, 7 are by Knizia, 2 are by Wolfgang Kramer, and 1 by Uwe Rosenberg.
Why do y'all think that is?
I have a theory that, I mean, part
We
of
have
it is
audience bias for sure.
part of it's our audience bias, right?
Yep,
I
it
think
has
there
to be.
are like in a different audience, different games would
Yeah.
come to the top, right?
100%.
I think Bus, for example, is a game that a lot of people
Yeah.
might put up there as sort of being like a game that some people talk about as like creating the worker placement genre.
Yeah.
Uh,
Chinatown.
Tichu is for people who love Tichu. You know, it's many people in the board game hobby. Number one most played game ever. Kind of one of like these forebearer modern trick taking games. For Sale could be on there. I think a lot of people would put Catan on there just for kind of the significance and great gameplay too. So I think part of it is bias. I think part of it too is that we're like in a moment where Reiner Knizia is putting out a ton of great games. A lot of these games are getting new versions. We mentioned Through the Desert is getting a new version. Raw just got a new version. So a lot of these games are still in print, which is a testament to the game itself too. But also that's something that's perhaps keeping these more front of mind than a game like For Sale or Torres or Bohnanza even, right? That's not that, have just kind of like these old 90s versions of the game that are the ones still seeing play today.
Yeah. I think that Knizia also, in my mind, one of the reasons why so many of these games are fondly remembered is Knizia really is the master of creating this sort of dense decision space in a light rule set. And that makes his games more approachable than I think a lot of games, than other games potentially could be, because he lets the games develop above the table through the interaction of play rather than writing the complexity in the rules book, which made his games, even in the 90s, right, to broader audiences more accessible. And I think they have the lasting impact in part because they get held up as these amazing games time after time that are easy to pick up and play. They're also just like amazing games. Talk about sort of creating an aesthetic that people might try to chase, at least in terms of length and weight for quite some time. And games have gotten larger, they've gotten more complex. Uwe has moved from Bohnanza to A Feast for Odin, and modern games are doing something, modern hobby games, a little different. But here, Tigris and Euphrates could be a heavy game
But I
in a heavy
think
space.
too, and then I want to hear Jared's thoughts. But I think like the pendulum is maybe swinging towards lighter games right
The
now, or sort
90s
of
are back.
like I think kind of the '90s are back, like swinging towards like simpler games, like easier to learn, meaty decision spaces. I think you see that in sort of like the trick taking renaissance that have captured a lot of people. You kind of see that in the roll and write games before that. And I think like a lot of the games of the day are now in a more Knizia space than they might have been 5 or 10 years ago, even when A Feast for Odin was the biggest game publishing. So it's interesting. We're doing this list now. It would be interesting to revisit this list in 10 years, and I think we should, Brendan, and see if maybe then if we're in a different era in gaming, Bus would be like seen as in a different light than we're looking at it today through our subjective lens. Jared, what do you think about all of this?
I agree. I think the pendulum is swinging back towards a little bit more streamlined was fit, because to paraphrase someone's quote, the most important aspect of a game are the other players, right? That's what you're really trying to do, is engage with that above the table. And people have preferences, but when it comes down to it, like it's a shared experience, and you're going through. And a lot of these games from the 90s, it's you again really care about what other people are doing, and that's manifested in different ways. Uh, but there's the pros and cons. We talked about the fragility of modern art, right? And so auctions kind of went out of vogue because they can be harsh and punishing, and people can have bad first impressions and able to go through. But when it circles back around, you can see how they also provide such meaningful interaction. And so if you can get through it, and I think part of what we're dealing with today is just the volume of games, right? Back when these were coming out in the 90s, like there was only, a handful of big releases available, so people played them over and over and over and over again, versus nowadays where there's so many, it's nearly impossible to keep up, and we're driven a little bit more by novelty, right? Just trying new things in new ways. But
Yeah.
the timelessness of these classics, right? It's already been shown, and it'll be interested to see what games from the 20s are going to persist into the future.
Such a good point, Jared. We were at an event yesterday together, and somebody asked me like, "What is like the hot game right now?" And I kind of like, I had to kind of think about it. It's like, there really aren't any. I have this Monday night game group that Jared's a part of, and we just play a different game every single week. It's so rare that we revisit anything. And I mean, you could probably count on one hand the number of games that have reached more than 2 plays, and all of those are filler games. So yeah, it's just a totally different space than when these were operating in, but also knowing that your game must be developed in a way that it will stand up to 100 plays. That's a pretty cool standard to have, and I think it shows in all these games. And I think a lot of people who listen to this podcast are probably familiar and aware of these being absolutely worth playing today. But to those listeners who are maybe newer to board games, are more into keeping up with the hotness, like I implore you to go back, check out some of these games, check out, Raw, El Grande, Tigris, and Euphrates, to name our top 3, and see if those hold up to the games coming out this year. And I think you will be pleasantly surprised.
Well, I think that's incredibly well put. And with that, I hope that if you enjoyed this episode, you will rate Decision Space, give us a rating so we can hear your thoughts on the show. If you've listened this long, we'd love your feedback. Feedback is how we grow. If you like more things Decision Space, check out decisionspacepodcast.com. Thank you to Hembry for our intro and outro song, Reach Out. In this episode, an extra special thanks to Jared Ingersoll for joining us.
Thank you, Jared.
To go back into the 90s in the time machine and rate the 10 best games of that decade. Should we do other decades? Should we do the 2000s, the aughts? Should we do 2010s? Who knows? Let us know in our Discord, which you can find a link to in our show notes below. Thanks so much for listening.
Thank you. Take care.